It's all covered in today's China Truths.
China's flood apocalypse, the truth behind the Three Gorges Dam. The summer of 2025 wasn't just another rainy season. It was the summer China began to drown. Before the government even declared flood season, millions were already underwater. From the steel cities of the north to the rice fields of the south, the country was swallowed by chaos. Factories vanished beneath brown water, highways turned into rivers, and entire villages disappeared overnight, erased from the map by storms that never seemed to end. By early July, Beijing admitted that more than 300 rivers had burst their limits. But insiders said the truth was far worse. This wasn't just nature's fury. It was a disaster built by human hands. At the center of it all stands the Three Gorges Dam, once praised as China's greatest engineering miracle. State media called it the pride of the nation, claiming it could stop a 1,000-year flood. But that promise didn't last long. Quietly, officials scaled it down, from 1,000 years to 100. Now, under extreme pressure, that 100-year safety is cracking, literally. As the Yangtze's waters rose, 7 massive floodgates were opened, unleashing a torrent so fierce it could fill Westlake in just 5 minutes. Officials called it flood control. Locals called it flood release. Entire cities downstream were sacrificed, so the statistics could look clean. Dr. Wang Weiluo, one of the original engineers, called the dam a grand illusion. He revealed its true purpose wasn't to prevent floods, but to generate profit. To squeeze out maximum electricity, water levels were deliberately kept dangerously high during the rainy season, leaving no space to absorb incoming storms. And when nature struck, there was no choice but to open the gates and drown whatever stood below. As Dr. Wang warned, the dam has become China's gray rhino, a massive threat hiding in plain sight. But the danger doesn't stop there. Across China, nearly 100,000 dams and reservoirs are aging, poorly maintained, and at risk of failure. Nighttime discharges, done secretly to avoid public outrage, have become routine. The once indestructible Three Gorges Dam now shows visible deformities. Satellite data and seismic studies reveal that the enormous weight of trapped water has warped the surrounding ground and triggered earthquakes, up to 30 times more frequent than before. Even NASA confirmed the reservoir's mass is so vast, it slightly slowed Earth's rotation. Yet the greatest cost of all isn't measured in science. It's measured in lives. Over 1.3 million people were uprooted for the dam's construction. 13 cities, 140 towns, and 1,300 villages vanished beneath its waters, taking with them centuries of history, culture, and memory. The dam promised prosperity, but the wealth flowed east, to the glittering towers of Shanghai, while those who lost everything were left forgotten, watching from the shadows of the flood that never ends. China's history carries a haunting echo, the sound of water and silence. In 1975, the Banqiao Dam collapsed in the dead of night, unleashing a wall of destruction that erased over 200,000 lives. It was one of the deadliest man-made disasters in history, yet the truth was buried, sealed beneath layers of secrecy and propaganda. The tragedy should have changed everything, but in China, history has a way of repeating itself, only on a grander scale. Decades later, another monument rose from the same mindset, the Three Gorges Dam. It wasn't just a dam, it was a declaration of power, a concrete symbol of man's triumph over nature, and the party's promise of control over chaos. State media called it a miracle, proof that China could command the rivers themselves. But deep beneath the celebration lay a quiet fear. What if the storm refuses to obey? Experts like Michael Auslin have long warned that if the Three Gorges Dam fails to contain the floods, or worse, suffers structural damage, it could trigger not only an environmental catastrophe, but also a political one. The dam was built to represent strength, but one fracture, one failure, could expose the weakness of the system it was meant to glorify. That fear began to take shape in the summer of 2025. Late in June, as dark clouds gathered over Sichuan, torrential rains battered the province for days. The Zipingpu Reservoir, just 9 kilometers from Chengdu, began releasing water in the middle of the night. At first, officials said it was routine, but by July 3rd, entire districts of Chengdu were underwater. Streets turned to rivers, cars vanished beneath the current, and homes were swept away as desperate families watched from their rooftops. The same water that was meant to protect the people had once again become a weapon of destruction. As the Yangtze River swelled to dangerous heights, it was no longer just testing the strength of China's dams, it was testing the strength of its system. The floods tore through the illusion of control, revealing a fragile reality beneath decades of propaganda. The Three Gorges Dam, once hailed as the pinnacle of human engineering, now stood as a monument to arrogance, a structure so massive yet so vulnerable that it could one day crumble under the very force that it tried to contain. And now, as the storms grow stronger and the warnings louder, one question hangs over the nation like a shadow. It's no longer about if disaster will come, but when. And when it does, who will pay the price when the tide finally turns? China's silent flood, the tragedy they tried to hide. The summer of 2025 wasn't just hot, it was apocalyptic. Across China, the skies broke open with a fury not seen in decades. What began as scattered showers turned into a nationwide nightmare, swallowing entire towns before anyone could even react. Deep in the mountains of Guizhou, the people of Rongjiang County faced the storm twice, once on June 24th, and again, just 4 days later. The rivers rose without mercy. Homes, crops, and memories disappeared beneath walls of brown water. When the second flood came, rescuers waded through the darkness, carrying children on their backs and elderly villagers in their arms. By dawn, half the town was gone. It was the worst disaster locals had seen in 30 years. But the storm didn't stop in Guizhou. Hundreds of kilometers away in Hubei province, another nightmare unfolded. Between June 30th and July 1st, Shanfeng County was swallowed whole in the middle of the night. The water came like a thief, fast, silent, and unstoppable. Entire neighborhoods vanished within minutes. By the time dawn broke, only rooftops peaked above the flood. By July 3rd, chaos had reached Henan. In Taiping town, eyewitnesses described the river rising like a monster, swallowing roads in less than 3 minutes. There was no time to run, no chance to understand. Nature wasn't just striking back. It was devouring everything in its path. In Hunan, entire towns became islands overnight. Since mid-June, over 400,000 people were trapped or displaced. Streets turned to rivers, fields turned to lakes. Even in Hangzhou, once a symbol of calm beauty, the famous West Lake overflowed with violent waves, breaking its legendary stillness. And then came the unthinkable, the floods that weren't just natural. At 2 a.m. on July 15th in Chengdu village, Lijiang, villagers woke to the roar of water. It wasn't only rain, it was a release, a deliberate one. Days earlier, the Xinhua news agency had quietly issued a notice. To protect key areas, floodwaters would be diverted into lowlands. In plain words, some people were chosen to drown so others could survive. That same week, the Tuokou hydropower plant opened 7 floodgates, sending a torrent straight into Rongjiang. No sirens, no warnings, no escape. Villagers realized too late that the flood was not an accident. It was an order. Meanwhile, the real storm was gathering further north. On June 30th, massive floods from the Min and Jinsha rivers surged toward Yibin City in Sichuan, joining into a single monstrous current charging toward the Three Gorges Dam, the largest in the world. By July 2nd, the reservoir had climbed to 152.87 meters, already 7 meters above the warning line. Water poured in faster than it could be released, 30,000 cubic meters per second in, but only 20,400 out. The dam was filling like a ticking bomb. By July 7th, the water reached 171 meters, just 4 meters shy of the dam's design limit. Behind closed doors in Beijing, panic took over. Leaked reports from Zhongnanhai revealed emergency meetings and one chilling order from the top. Do whatever it takes. The dam must not break. But there was only one way to save it: open the floodgates. The discharge began, described by engineers as drinking poison to survive. Every second, millions of tons of water crashed downstream, submerging cities like Yichang, Wuhan, and Nanjing. Factories drowned, homes disappeared, and the people realized the truth. The government had chosen to save the dam, not them. From Beijing, there was silence. At a rare press briefing, Deputy Water Minister Chen Min confirmed that over 326 rivers were flooding, but China's top leaders stayed out of sight. No condolences, no appearances, no accountability. In Shanfeng County, the silence was even heavier. The flood struck at midnight, catching thousands in their sleep. By the time the red alert was issued at 6 a.m., the town was already gone. Within 12 hours, the area recorded 342 millimeters of rainfall, shattering every record in its history. A resident named Mr. Huang said a couple in the romantic castle apartment complex had drowned, and others were critically injured. Videos and posts exposing the truth vanished within hours, deleted under orders of information control. No one knows how many lives were truly lost that night. What's clear is that the flood didn't just drown homes and towns, it drowned the truth. In a nation where silence runs deeper than the rivers themselves, the question now is not how high the water will rise, but how long the truth can stay buried beneath it. In July 2025, the flood season officially began in China, but for millions, the disaster had already quietly arrived beforehand. From industrial zones in the north to agricultural regions in the south, the country was drowning in a chain of uncontrollable crises. 329 rivers had exceeded warning levels, a figure officially acknowledged by China's Ministry of Water Resources on July 4th. But the truth is more frightening. This is not merely a natural disaster, but a man-made crisis centered on one colossal structure, the Three Gorges Dam. For decades, the Three Gorges Dam has been the ultimate symbol of CCP power, a colossal project representing arrogance and the belief that nature could be conquered to propel China into a modern era. When it was completed in 2003, state media boasted that the dam could withstand a once-in-a-millennium flood. But later, this claim was quietly downgraded to a once-in-a-century flood. Now, as the dam itself is under the highest level red alert, even that downgraded promise is exposed as a dangerous lie. As water levels surpassed warning thresholds, the Three Gorges Dam opened as many as 11 floodgates, releasing a massive flow of 44,000 cubic meters per second, enough to fill Westlake in just 5 minutes and 300 Westlakes in a single day. But this was not flood control, it was flood creation. A political decision to protect the upstream at a devastating one to those downstream. Dr. Wang Weiluo, a hydraulic expert who once took part in planning the Three Gorges Dam, has spent years exposing what he calls a great deception. He asserts that the dam's primary purpose was never flood control, but profit from hydroelectric power. The original reports recommended lowering the reservoir to 145 meters during the rainy season to accommodate incoming floods. However, in order to maximize profits, water levels were kept high, stripping the dam of its buffer capacity and forcing emergency discharges to prevent rupture. Wang warns that this is a gray rhino event, a large, obvious threat that is willfully ignored. The problem extends beyond a single dam. China has approximately 98,000 reservoirs, and Wang estimates that a significant portion of them do not meet safety standards. Sudden water releases, often conducted at night, have become standard practice to avoid accountability. The foundation of the Three Gorges Dam is not only fractured in terms of governance, but also faces serious physical stability concerns. The Chinese government has admitted that the dam has experienced minor shifts. Studies have shown that excessive water pressure has caused structural cracks and increased seismic activity in the region. Some areas have seen a 30-fold rise in earthquakes since the reservoir was filled. NASA has confirmed that the dam's water mass has even slowed the Earth's rotation. The original sins of the project are recorded in the human costs it incurred. The construction of the Three Gorges Dam triggered the largest forced relocation in history for a single project, displacing at least 1.3 million people. The dam submerged 13 cities, 140 towns, and over 1,300 villages, along with countless priceless archaeological sites. Critics argue that the promised economic benefits never reached the local population. Instead, the electricity and enormous profits flowed to coastal megacities like Shanghai. China's tragic history of dam failures, such as the 1975 Banqiao Dam disaster that killed an estimated 230,000 people, serves as a chilling reminder of what's at stake. Michael Auslin, a scholar at the Hoover Institution, notes that if the Three Gorges Dam suffers a major failure in flood control or safety, it would be a fatal blow to the Chinese Communist Party's legitimacy. The regime has staked its reputation on the dam's success. Should it fail, the core promise of safety and competent governance would collapse. The resulting damage, combined with other governance challenges, could be the tipping point leading to widespread instability. As the Yangtze River rises, it is now testing the very foundation of the Chinese Communist Party's power. The Three Gorges Dam, a project born from political ambition and built upon conflicting priorities, has become the regime's greatest vulnerability. The question is no longer whether this colossal gamble will have dire consequences, but when, and whether the ruling party itself will be swept away with it. The timeline of destruction was relentless. Between June 29th and 30, the Sichuan basin was hit by torrential rains. At 10 p.m. on June 29th, the Zaipingpu Reservoir near Dujiangyan, Sichuan, about 9 kilometers northwest of Chengdu, began increasing water discharge, worsening the flooding in the provincial capital by July 3rd. In Guizhou, Rongjiang County was devastated by 2 severe floods on June 24th and 28th. The people of Rongjiang were suffering immensely. When the second wave hit, rescue teams were forced to carry out emergency evacuations. It was a historic flood, the worst in 30 years. In Hubei, during the night of June 30th to July 1st, Xianfeng County was almost entirely swallowed by a sudden, violent flood. The speed at which the disaster struck was terrifying. On July 3rd in Taiping Town, Jiqixia County, Hainan Province, a river suddenly rose and submerged an entire road within just 2 to 3 minutes, according to eyewitnesses. In Hunan, floods began rising across the region from June 18th. The towns of Badagongshan and Longshan were rapidly engulfed. Over 400,000 people were affected, and 95,000 had to be evacuated. On July 12th, Hangzhou's Westlake witnessed a historic rainfall. At 2 a.m. on July 15th, a sudden downpour struck Xinzhu village in Lijiang. But even more dangerous was something operating quietly in the background, a deliberate flood discharge order issued by the authorities. On June 27th, Xinhua news agency Qiao, the official mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party, released a chilling report. To protect high-risk areas, water would be released into low-lying zones. It was an explicit policy declaration, a calculated plan to sacrifice certain communities to save others, and the authorities moved swiftly to carry it out. Soon after, the Tuoco hydropower plant opened 7 floodgates in succession, sending surging waters from the Yuan River into Rongjiang County. Residents were caught off guard. Social media posts confirmed the large-scale flood release, with no warning, no protection. All of this was merely a prelude to the crisis now unfolding along the Yangtze River. At 6 p.m. on June 30th, massive floodwaters from the Min and Jinsha rivers converged on Yibin City, Sichuan province, sending tidal surges rushing toward the Three Gorges Dam. The pressure rose rapidly. By 2 p.m. on July 2nd, monitoring data showed the dam's reservoir had reached 152.87 meters, over 7 meters above the official flood threshold. Inflow volume was 30,000 cubic meters per second, while outflow was only 20,400. The dam was filling at an alarming rate. By July 7th, the situation had become critical. Water levels had surpassed the 171-meter warning line, approaching the dam's maximum design capacity of 175 meters. This was the moment the story took a much darker turn. A news bulletin from GPI News, released at 6:37 p.m. on July 7th, revealed the true extent of panic behind the closed doors of Zhongnanhai. According to reliable internal reports, top-level leadership in Beijing held multiple emergency meetings and issued an unusually harsh directive. Every possible measure must be taken to prevent the dam from breaking. Beijing issued its highest-level red alert. The armed police force, military, and engineering units were all mobilized around the clock. The Southern Theater Command was placed on combat readiness. Units quietly assembled around the dam, preparing for the worst-case scenario. But to relieve the pressure, authorities were forced to conduct emergency water discharges, a move one expert described as drinking poison to quench thirst. Every cubic meter of released water was a death sentence downstream. Yichang, Wuhan, and Nanjing all had to activate emergency response protocols. The government was sacrificing cities to save the dam. While millions of Chinese citizens lost their homes, livelihoods, and in some cases their lives, only a chilling silence echoed from Beijing. At a State Council press conference, Deputy Minister of Water Resources Chen Min confirmed the scale of the crisis. 329 rivers across the country were experiencing floods. Yet amid such widespread devastation, the top leadership of the Chinese Communist Party was nowhere to be seen. Nowhere was this abandonment more evident than in Jianfeng County, Enshi City, Hubei Province. The disaster struck in the dead of night. Residents received no warning whatsoever. It wasn't until 6 a.m. that authorities issued a red alert for heavy rain. But by then, it was far too late. In just 12 hours, rainfall reached 342.2 millimeters, breaking all local records. The CCP's official response was swift, not to provide aid but to control public opinion. Authorities claimed over 18,000 people had been evacuated and that there were no casualties. But eyewitness accounts at the scene contradicted this. A local resident named Huang reported that a couple living in the romantic castle residential area had died, and several others were hospitalized with injuries. Due to the CCP's ruthless information control, the true death toll remains a state secret. I've lived for 8 decades, but never in my life have I witnessed Chengdu, Sichuan, drowned under such monstrous rain. Out of nowhere, a torrential downpour swallowed the city. Overnight, Chengdu was no longer a bustling metropolis. It turned into a vast ocean. Streets vanished under waves of floodwater. The subway system collapsed as tunnels filled with muddy torrents, and cars were abandoned like stranded boats. Even the iconic Erxianqiao Bridge was useless. In Chenghua Road, people needed actual boats to move around, with locals ferrying passengers for 5 yuan a trip. Chengdu had no choice but to issue its highest-level red alert for rainstorms. The numbers are staggering. In Qingyang District's People's Park, rainfall reached 171.7 millimeters, smashing historical records. Within just 1 hour, 82.4 millimeters fell, the most intense downpour in all of China at that moment. Across the city, nearly 100 rain stations recorded extreme levels, paralyzing Chengdu's core. 23 bridges sank underwater, with some sections over half a meter deep. The East Railway Station flooded, subways shut down, water supplies cut, and even the airport was thrown into chaos with dozens of delayed flights. Authorities rushed into action. Chengdu launched a Level 3 flood emergency response, deploying 3,000 personnel and hundreds of rescue vehicles. Across Sichuan, more than 28,000 residents were forced out of danger zones, with entire towns evacuated overnight. But the disaster did not stop there. A violent 45,000 M3 mudflow ripped through Longchai town, unleashing a terrifying scene. Meanwhile, the Fujiang River in Maiyanyang surged with 7,400 meters per second of water, smashing downstream areas with unstoppable force. And this was only the beginning. In late June 2025, the Sichuan Basin faced its deadliest floods in years. The Minjiang and Jinsha rivers merged in Yibin City, swelling the mighty Yangtze. At Hyangate Station, the water level soared to 267 meters, with terrifying flows above 20,000 meters per second. The Three Gorges Reservoir alone was hammered by nearly 30,000 meters per second, forcing operators to open floodgates and worsening downstream destruction. Across southern China, an area of 100,000 kilometers drowned in relentless storms, with 70,000 kilometers under extreme rainfall. In just 24 hours, more than 14 billion m3 of rain fell, equal to 1,000 West Lakes crashing down at once. Now, the question that terrifies millions. Can China's pride, the Three Gorges Dam, withstand such brutal punishment? Reports of hidden water releases, signs of deformation, and silt-choked reservoirs fuel growing fears. This colossal engineering project, once called invincible, is being pushed to its breaking point. If it fails, what happens next? And where, if anywhere, would be safe? Sichuan is no stranger to disasters, but in recent decades, its vulnerability to extreme weather has skyrocketed. Research shows that floods in the Xiongguan Mountains are appearing 12 times more often per decade. A 2025 nationwide study revealed an alarming fact. Sichuan now has the highest flood frequency in all of China. And here's the eerie part. These floods began surging after 2003, the exact year the Three Gorges Reservoir started filling. Scientists stopped short of calling it direct cause and effect, but the timing is too suspicious to ignore. Sichuan has also become a hotspot for double disasters: heat waves followed by flash floods, or droughts overlapping with scorching heat. The Chengdu-Chongqing corridor is especially battered. Climate models predict that under high-emission scenarios, the number of extreme weather days could triple in the coming decades. Carbon trackers confirm the same trend. Global warming is amplifying Sichuan's chaos, turning each year deadlier than the last. But climate isn't the only enemy. Human engineering plays a darker role. Sichuan generates more hydropower than any other Chinese province, with 3,700 stations in more than 8,000 reservoirs scattered across its rivers. These massive structures block natural flows, warp local weather, and when storms hit, operators are forced to dump water downstream to protect the dams, drowning cities in the process. The Three Gorges Dam, once celebrated as the ultimate symbol of China's ability to conquer nature, now looks increasingly fragile. Research shows that since the reservoir began storing water, summers became hotter, winters harsher, and extreme rainfall events spiked across northeastern Sichuan. Towns like Dazhu, Pingzhou, Guanggan, and Nanchong have endured year after year of violent downpours. From 2004 to 2014 alone, at least 32 extreme rainfall events were recorded, many exceeding 250 millimeters in just a single day. Scientists even warned that the vast water vapor rising from the reservoir could be feeding monsoon clouds, dragging more rainfall into Sichuan itself. Satellite studies back this up. In 2006, Japanese researcher Nakaha found that the Three Gorges Reservoir actually increased rainfall in the Daba and Qinling Mountains, regions notorious for flash floods and deadly landslides. Meanwhile, Sichuan's vast river network is loaded with more than 60 hydropower plants, capable of holding nearly 70 billion cubic meters of water. But when they discharge during storms, the silt flows straight toward the Three Gorges Dam. And here lies the ticking time bomb: sediment. In 2020 alone, the reservoir trapped 140 million tons of silt, but discharged just 25%. By 2020, silt had piled up to 2.1 billion tons. Attempts at dredging failed. Equipment broke down in days, and unstable banks made excavation too dangerous. The only option left? Release massive floods to flush the mud out. Except that means unleashing devastation on low-lying areas downstream, places like Dongting Lake in Wuhan. The dam once stood as a monument to human ambition, but now it raises terrifying questions. Experts whisper about deformation and displacement in the structure. Officials insist the situation is under control, but public fear grows louder. What happens if the Three Gorges Dam breaks? According to disaster researchers, the safest escape lies far from the Yangtze's fury. The Shenangjia Mountains in northwestern Hubei, rising 3,025 meters above sea level, could serve as a natural fortress. But for the millions living in the floodplain below, that knowledge offers little comfort. The bigger question remains: has humanity truly mastered nature? Or have we built a colossal trap that could one day swallow us whole? As climate change accelerates, China faces a harsh reality. Floods and torrential rains are no longer rare disasters, but recurring nightmares growing stronger each year. Experts warn that the old belief in one colossal dam holding back nature is no longer enough. The pressing question now is, can the Three Gorges Dam still protect millions, control the floods, and stand as China's symbol of engineering power? Cracks have already been spotted on the surface of the Three Gorges Dam, and experts say the massive structure has shown signs of slow deformation over time. What was once praised as flawless engineering now raises deep concerns. The pressure of billions of tons of water pressing against weakened concrete is not something to ignore. Authorities insist these shifts are within safe limits, But the public sees the images and wonders, is this still under control or the first signal of disaster? When torrential rains send enormous volumes of water rushing toward the dam, the question becomes urgent. Can the Three Gorges withstand the pressure? Each year, inflows during flood season grow more violent, testing the dam beyond its original design. If one section fails, the domino effect could unleash unstoppable destruction. Warnings from scientists, both inside and outside China, highlight the risks, but official reports downplay them. For millions living downstream, reassurance is no longer enough. The nightmare scenario is one no one dares to face directly: a breach of the dam. If it happens, the unleashed floodwaters would sweep through the Yangtze Basin, affecting cities like Wuhan, Nanjing, and even Shanghai. Hundreds of millions could be at risk in a matter of hours. Entire regions, farmland, and industries would vanish beneath the surge. Experts describe it as not just a national catastrophe, but a disaster of global scale. The Three Gorges Dam, once a symbol of triumph, now stands as a looming question mark hanging over China's future. For decades, the Three Gorges Dam was hailed as mankind's answer to nature, a fortress that would forever tame the Yangtze. But the reality is harsher than the promise. Cracks, deformation, and overwhelming floodwaters have exposed the truth. No structure, no matter how grand, is immune to time and pressure. What was once celebrated as pride and power now hangs over hundreds of millions of lives as a silent threat. Each new storm is a reminder that nature cannot be controlled, only respected. The future of the dam is no longer just an engineering question. It is a question of survival. Will China invest in real solutions or continue gambling on a structure already showing its limits? If the dam holds, it will be remembered as a miracle of endurance. If it fails, it will become the greatest man-made disaster in history. And for those living downstream, every rainfall is not just weather, it is a countdown. Only time will reveal the truth, but the clock is ticking louder with every passing season. Each storm that rages through the Yangtze Basin, each river that swells beyond its banks, pushes the Three Gorges Dam into another trial of survival. What was once called a shield for hundreds of millions is now under constant scrutiny. People wonder, is it still protecting lives or slowly turning into a danger itself? Every flood is more than just water pressing against concrete walls. It is a direct confrontation between human ambition and the raw force of nature. Each surge challenges not only the engineering strength of the dam, but also the very idea that mankind can bend rivers to its will. With every rainfall, cracks are questioned, shifts are measured, and doubts grow stronger. And in those moments, nature delivers its warning with brutal clarity. No matter how powerful, no matter how advanced, human creations are temporary. The Three Gorges Dam does not stand against water alone. It stands against time, against climate change, and against the very limits of human control. One day we will learn the final answer. The only question is, will it come too late?
Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. We will keep reporting on the COVID surge in China, so don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell to get the latest videos. And thank you for tuning in.